Hi there, and welcome to Culture Clash. In honor of the 30th anniversary of the release of The Little Mermaid, we're starting the channel out with the Disney Renaissance series. Over the next month, we'll look at 8 of the 9 Renaissance films in 4 pairs. Up first is The Little Mermaid against The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In the future, the focus of the channel will be books, primarily, but any narrative-based cultural product is fair game, as long as sparks fly when it rubs up against another one. If you have a suggestion for a future video, drop it in the comments. In case you haven't watched any of the approximately 2 million explainers about it on this website, the term Disney Renaissance refers to a period of sustained critical and commercial success enjoyed by Walt Disney Animation Studios. Their first real period of success since Disney's death in 1965, in fact. The period lasted from 1989 to 1999, with about one film being released per year. If you don't count The Rescuers Down Under, and you really shouldn't, each film follows a Broadway musical template. They also share similar themes and story structure, which makes them great material for comparison. As a brief recap, or introduction, to these films, Mermaid is about a mermaid named Ariel making a deal with the devil in exchange for a chance at love and life as a human being. Hunchback tells the story of the deformed bell ringer of Notre Dame, the French cathedral that caught on fire a few months ago, leading boomers the world over to reminisce about Paris honeymoons, getting acceptance from the outside world. These aren't the most similar films for the Renaissance canon, at least on the surface, but consider the view from under the sea. Each protagonist longs to explore a world outside of the one they've been confined to by a parental authority figure. Their defiance lands them in a love triangle, or quadrangle, with a person from that outside world. The crucial difference is that only one of these love triangles works out in favor of the protagonist. But we're basically dealing with the same story template, one that should be familiar to anyone who's ever watched the Disney Channel. How to get around your parents to gain worldly experience, symbolized by, or even culminating in, romance and that suspicious Lion King cloud aside, Disney is a family company. The audience for these films are middle-class suburbanites. Thus, the stories have to be cool enough to appeal to the kids without being too subversive of the values of those who bought the tickets. Mermaid's Triton threads this needle perfectly. He's strict, but he loves and protects his daughter. His authority is enhanced by the fact that any parental cluelessness is largely outsourced to Sebastian. Ariel has to go behind his back to his literal worst enemy to get her way. But crucially, her plan fails. Eric does fall in love with her, but through Ursula's scheming and sheer plot contrivance, he fails to kiss her in time. Only after Daddy saves her from the consequences of her deal with the devil, and Boyfriend saves her from a Pirates of the Caribbean-style whirlpool-causing sea witch, can she sail into the literal sunset. When she's turned back into a human, it's through her father's trident, i.e., the right way. The message is that sex and relationships can work out great, if the patriarchy's on board. Otherwise, watch out. Overall, a pretty classic story of teenage rebellion failing, followed by the parent granting the teen exactly what they wanted to begin with. Hunchback is a creative reworking of this template. Although Frollo is simply too creepy a character to make him a stand-in for modern-day suburban dads, the writers try and make him somewhat sympathetic, at least to the point where the audience can understand Quasimodo's feelings of love and dependency. They do this primarily by giving him Mother Gothel-esque father knows best lines in the middle of Quasimodo's I want number. Let's have a look. The world is cruel, the world is wicked. It's I alone whom you can trust in this whole city. I am your only friend. I who keep you, teach you, feed you, dress you. I who look upon you without fear. How can I protect you, boy, unless you always stay in here? Always in here. Remember what I've taught you, Quasimodo. You are deformed, and you are ugly. Mermaid's counterpart to this song, coming in a similar place in the plot between the characters' two-part I Want song, is the Oscar-winning Under the Sea. Whereas Sebastian and company play up the virtues of Ariel's aqueous home to entice her into staying, Frollo exploits Quasi's fear and low self-esteem to keep him in line, mixed with his own twisted prejudices about society. He's unambiguously a bad dad. Any resolution where the two are reconciled would send an unacceptable message about abuse. But then, even in safe, happy families, plenty of kids go through phases of thinking their parents are the worst. So you can't seem to be suggesting that sneaking behind your parents' backs will yield adventure and romance. Ultimately, Hunchback splits the difference. Quasimodo's defiance of Frollo is ratified by the plot, and by his surrogate parents, the gargoyles, but he doesn't get the girl. Romantic relationships cannot go unchaperoned. And unlike in the books, Quasi ends up fighting for the Romani as a group rather than acting monomaniacally out of his crush on Esmeralda. Remarkably, Hunchback is the only Renaissance film where the protagonist's love interest ends up with somebody else. That is, to this day, one of the biggest controversies around the film. Of all the times for Disney to teach kids that the first spark of flirtation doesn't immediately lead to marriage, they had to choose their one story centering an ugly person, whose alleged disfiguredness was a major plot point. While this coincidence is indeed unfortunate, there's a reason why Hunchback had to end this way, besides Quasi having a bad dad. Well, actually, I lied. This totally does have to do with Frollo as well, but this time in his role as a foil to Quasi rather than as a father figure. As much as both Hunchback and Mermaid deal with the dangerous potential of romance and the necessary guardrails constructed around it, they take different approaches to this theme. Whereas Mermaid is about wanting to be desired by someone else, Hunchback is about what happens when desire for someone else becomes obsessive and non consensual. The twist in Ariel's love story is that she has to win Eric without her voice, using only body language. Whereas Mermaid is about wanting to be desired by someone else, Hunchback is about what happens when desire for someone else becomes obsessive and non consensual. The twist in Ariel's love story is that she has to win Eric without her voice, using only it thus becomes Quasi's job to metamorphose into his master's opposite. In other words, since Frollo leans so heavily into the if I can't have her, no one can trope, the screenplay logically inclines toward offering us an alternative to this model. This is where Phoebus comes in. He's a neutral, boring man, a virtuous blonde Ken doll of a love interest. Totally unlike in the book, where he acts just as possessively towards Esmeralda as Frollo does. Even though Esmeralda has tender feelings for Quasi and may even have started to love him, she ends up with someone else. And this crucially allows Quasi the chance to diverge from his master and choose to respect female agency. The film gives great weight to his growing self-acceptance as he begins to hope for love, before pivoting to his gradual acceptance that Esmeralda has chosen someone else. But they do this without ever implying that either arc negates the other. Nevertheless, the shifting goalposts here have left some viewers upset. If Hunchback were constructed entirely around Quasi's insecurities, it would make sense for him to find love by the end. But the problem is, that would, in the film that we have, in some sense validate Frollo's worldview. The message then becomes, nice guys finish first, not sometimes in life, love goes unrequited, and you just have to deal with it. In part because the literary source material here is so top-notch. Seriously, if you haven't read Hunchback, go read it. Disney does an exceptionally good job of having the hero learn from the villain. It's not perfect. Typically for a 90s movie, racism is depicted as a matter of individual character rather than of societal scapegoating, but the villain's beliefs are considered, examined, and rejected. Most of the feminist criticisms levied at Mermaid could have been fixed by a similar thinking through of its villain. Ursula has a specific argument about romance that impacts Ariel's journey. You'll have your looks, your pretty face, and don't underestimate the importance of body language. The men up there don't like a lot of blabber. They think a girl who gossips is a bore. Yes, on land it's much preferred for ladies not to say a word, and after all, dear, what is idle prattle for? Come on, they're not all that impressed with conversation. True gentlemen avoid it when they can. But they dote and swoon and fawn on a lady who's withdrawn. It's she who holds her tongue who gets a man. This stands in direct contrast to Ariel's belief, articulated just a couple of songs before, that the surface world is a place where bright young women, sick of swimmin', are not reprimanded by male authority figures. At this point, it would seem natural to expect some confrontation of these visions. But we don't get one. Instead, Ursula's ideology of female passivity prevails, however much of an obstacle it may be, and although she does manage to be expressive in some other ways, Ariel's muteness doesn't keep Eric from falling in love with her. Worse, the repetition of the Sleeping Beauty type trope that Ariel must be kissed for the spell to break combines with the whole voice situation to reinforce Ursula's really harmful ideas about female passivity in romantic relationships. The writers could have used the film's last scenes to reset the romance, instead of to reassert patriarchal authority. For example, Triton could have taught Ariel that she needs to get to know Eric properly before marrying him, perhaps even by telling the story of his courtship of Ariel's mother. OMG guys, this fanfic is already a way better exploration of the Ariel-Triton relationship than Little Mermaid Ariel's beginning. But of course, the 90s had no patience for such woke, self-aware fairy tales. Where would Disney be today without the Renaissance to kick around and make fun of? But was there perhaps a more subtle way to refute Ursula's benighted view of romance? Yes. The potential is there in the symbol of the voice. Beyond the fact that Ariel is losing one of her favorite hobbies, singing, what does her giving up her vocal cords mean? What does it say that what Eric loved about her to begin with was precisely her voice? While singing can, of course, be just as ornamental as body language, voice can also stand in for personality, even mind. Eric's initial dismay at Ariel's muteness already serves as an implicit rebuke of Ursula's philosophy. They easily could have pushed that further. Or they could have stuck with some version of the original's unhappy ending to show that Ariel just didn't do it right. Instead, after letting Ursula brilliantly and memorably advance her side of the argument about how romance should work, the writers ironically take away the very voice that Ariel would need to rebut it. This is a theme that will come up again, as nearly all the Renaissance films, Mulan and Tarzan being the exceptions, work out more or less a dialogue between the hero's values and the villain's. We'll see this in the next pair, Lion King and Hercules, unless I change my mind. Everyone has strong opinions on Disney, so by all means, drop yours in the comments. And be sure to subscribe for the hottest takes this side of the Disney Plus launch. See you next time.